Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Sorry, it's been a little over, like a week and a half since I uploaded a video. Life's been a little busy lately. Today we are going all the way back to our Masculinity and Femininity in the Bible series, and we are moving on, okay? The last one I think we did on this ended Abraham and Sarah's story. Today we are going to move on and talk about Isaac and Rebekah, so Abraham's son, Isaac, right? But first, we're going to pray for this video, and then we're going to dive right in. God, thank you so much for sharing the stories of the history of the world with us. Thank you so much for showing us not only the good things about the people who are mentioned in the Bible, but also where they erred and where they had problems, so that way we can learn from these things and grow from these things. Thank you for giving us relatable people that we can, pull lessons out of and just really learn things from their stories. I ask that you would open the eyes and the ears and the hearts of anybody you would like to watch this video, and whatever lessons you want them to learn, even if it's something completely different than what I'm saying, go for it. This video is yours and not mine. I ask that you would take over in Jesus Christ's name. Okay, so we ended with Abraham and Sarah, right? And we're moving on to Isaac and Rebekah. Now, Isaac and Rebekah's story, well, the bits of it that they tell us anyway, can be found in Genesis. We're gonna kind of hop, skip, and jump through Genesis chapter 24 through 27, I think. If I'm looking down, it's because I'm looking at my notes. There are some different interesting parts that are told about Isaac and Rebekah's story. Now, of course, this is a biblical account, so we don't always get, all of the details that we would like. We don't get details of conversations a lot of the time, except, if they're particularly important ones. There's a lot of things that are just kind of open, right? Because we don't know exactly what happened. But we can see what the story says and pull out what is there, all right? We're going to start in chapter 24. If you have your Bibles, open them up, read along with me. You can always pause when I'm skipping through some and just read. It's a couple of chapters. Doesn't take very long. We're going to start in chapter 24. And we're going to go down. Am I starting in chapter 24? Yes, I'm starting in chapter 24. Okay. Now, if you watched my videos on Abraham and Sarah, you know that Abraham was given a promise by God that he was going to be the father of many nations. Sarah, of course, doubted this promise. They ended up conceiving and having Isaac in their very old age. And so now Abraham is pretty old, right? And he wants to arrange the marriage of his son, okay? So he tells his servant to go back to where his family is from to go get Isaac a wife, right? And we're gonna pick up in verse 11. Okay, so the servant made a promise that he would go and get Isaac a wife. And it says, verse 11, this is talking about the servant. And he made his camels to kneel down without the city by a well of water at the time of the evening, the time that women go out to draw water. And he said, O Lord God of my master Abraham, I pray thee, send me good speed this day, and show kindness unto my master Abraham. Behold, I stand here by the well of water, and the daughters of the men of the city come out to draw water. And let it come to pass that the damsel to whom I say, Let down thy pitcher, I pray thee, that I may drink, and she shall say, Drink, and I will give thy camels drink also. Let the same be she that thou hast appointed for my servant Isaac, and thereby shall I know that thou hast showed kindness unto my master. So if you think about it, the servant's pretty smart. He's like, okay, I'm supposed to go get, a wife for my master's son. Let me just let God handle this, right? So he prays to God, hey, God, if I do this, let the right one do this, right? To be a sign. And it came to pass, before he had done speaking, that behold, Rebekah came out, who was born to Bethuel, son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, with her pitcher upon her shoulder. And the damsel was very fair to look upon, a virgin, neither had any man known her. And she went down to the well, and filled up her pitcher, and came up. And the servant ran to meet her, and said, Let me, I pray thee, drink a little water of thy pitcher. And she said, Drink, my lord. And she hastened, and let down her pitcher upon her hand, and gave him drink. And when she had done giving him drink, she said, Whoops, I will draw water for thy camels also, until they have done drinking. I'm going to pause right there for a second. There was some study I saw once where it said that camels drink a lot of water, right? They can drink copious amounts of water. And if she's having to go down into the well and like drag up water for all these camels, that's quite a chore. So for her to have a servant's heart enough to be able to go down to the well and keep drawing water for these camels, it's shown that she was very kind to strangers and had a good heart, right? Verse 20. And she hastened and emptied her pitcher into the trough, and ran again to the well to draw water, and drew for all his camels. And the man, wondering at her, held his peace, to wit whether the Lord had made his journey prosperous or not. And it came to pass, as the camels had done drinking, that the man took a golden earring of 1/2 shekel weight, and 2 bracelets for her hands of 10 shekels weight of gold, and said, Whose daughter art thou? Tell me, I pray thee, is there room in thy father's house for us to lodge in? And she said unto him, I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, which she bare unto Nahor. Hi, Kitty. What are you doing? And she said, where was I? She said moreover unto him, We have both straw and provender enough, and room to lodge in. And the man bowed down his head and worshipped the Lord. Right? So the servant came, was like, God, I need you to handle this. Can you have this happen if I do this? Right? To show me who the one is for my master's son. And it comes to pass, right? It happens. The servant is very wise and trusting God in this. And we can already see that Rebekah has a servant's heart. She's going out of her way to help this stranger that she doesn't know, right? And she's getting water for his camels too. Kitty, stop that. And now, of course, he's worshiping God, which is the proper thing to do, right? If God pulls through for us, worshiping him and praising him for it, instead of praising ourselves or somehow thinking that we did it ourselves, is the proper way to do it. Stop that. Okay, verse 27. And he said, Blessed be the Lord God of my master Abraham, who have not left destitute my master of his mercy and his truth. I being in the way, the Lord led me to the house of my master's brethren. And the damsel ran and told them of her mother's house these things. So now she knows that, oh, hey, this stranger, works for our cousins, right? Okay. And so they bring him back to the house, right? Going through, I think, verse 48. They bring him back to the house, and he tells her family, right, that, hey, I came to get a wife for my master's son, for Abraham's son. I prayed and said this, and this is what happened. Rebekah was the one who showed up and did exactly what I asked God to do, to show me who was the one, right? Now, we're going to skip ahead to verse 49. And this is the servant talking again. And now if you will deal kindly and truly with my master, tell me. And if not, tell me, that I may turn to the right hand or to the left. Then Laban, which is her grandfather, I think, and Bethuel answered and said, The thing proceedeth from the Lord. We cannot speak unto thee bad or good. Behold, Rebekah is before thee. Take her and go, and let her be thy master's son's wife, as the Lord has spoken. And so these guys are very chill with it. They're like, okay, obviously this was God. Go ahead. And it came to pass that when Abraham's servant heard the words, he worshipped the Lord, bowing himself to the earth. And the servant brought forth jewels, silver and jewels. Where was I? Jewels of silver and jewels of gold and raiment, which is clothing, and gave them to Rebekah. He also gave to her brother and to her mother precious things. They ate and they drank. We're going to skip ahead a little bit. And so her family's like, hey, let her stay with us for another 10 days or so, and then you can go. And the servant's like, no, don't hinder me. Like, I need to go take her back. And so they're like, okay, well, let's ask her what she thinks, right? So 57 says, and they said, we will call the damsel and inquire at her mouth. And they called Rebekah and said unto her, wilt thou go with this man? And she said, I will go. So Rebekah, right off the bat, before she's even, married, before she's met Isaac, she is already comfortable in her femininity. She is, chilling with her family. She goes so far as to completely and utterly trust God in this, right? Some strange servant that she finds out is from, extended family, comes, basically is like, hey, you're the one who's supposed to be a wife to my master's son. And she trusts it all entirely. She trusts God. And she's like, okay, I'll go, right? Radical faith to be able to just be like, okay, let's do it. Where was I? And they sent Rebekah, their sister, and her nurse, and Abraham's servant and his men. And they blessed Rebekah and said unto her, thou art our sister, be thou the mother of thousands of millions, and let thy seed possess the gate of those which hate them. And Rebekah arose and her damsels, and they rode upon the camels and followed the man. And the servant took Rebekah and went his way. And Isaac came from the way of the well Laharoi. I think that's how you say that. I might be wrong. For he dwelt in the south country, and Isaac went out to meditate in the field at the evening tide. And he lifted up his eyes, and saw, and behold, the camels were coming. And Rebekah lifted up her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she lighted off the camel, for she had said unto the servant, what man is this that walketh in the field to meet us? And the servant had said, it is my master. Therefore she took a veil and covered herself. And the servant told Isaac all the things he had done. And Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent, and took Rebekah, and she became his wife. And he loved her. And Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. So, sorry guys, my nose gets itchy when I do these videos. So Rebekah goes with the servant, right? They show up with Isaac, and the servant tells Isaac everything that happened, and then lo and behold, the two of them get married. And it says specifically that that he loved her, okay? If you look through a lot of these Old Testament stories with the men and their wives, this is a phrase that is not used very often, okay? It does not, it does not very often say, that he loved her. In this particular one, it specifies that, okay, which means it's important, okay, that he actually loved her, right? If you think about it, a lot of the arranged marriages and stuff of the day probably did not exude as much love, let's face it, as they could, but this one specifically, he loved her. So all is well and good with Isaac and Rebekah right at the beginning, right? As most courtships and the beginning of a marriages usually are. Now, we're going to move on to chapter 25, and we are going to skip to verse 19 to 21. Because the beginning of 25 is just talking about Abraham's other sons that he had through concubines, other wives, through Hagar and Ishmael and all that. So it goes into all that. But verse 19 says, and these are the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham begat Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah to wife, the daughter of Bethuel the Syrian of Padan-aram, the sister to Laban the Syrian. And Isaac entreated the Lord, so Laban was, the brother then. And Isaac entreated the Lord for his wife, because she was barren. And the Lord was entreated of him, and Rebekah his wife conceived. So Rebekah is not having kids right away, okay? We saw the same thing with Sarah and Abraham, right? And so Isaac does the proper thing as a husband, and he goes to God, right? And he says, hey God, could we please have a kid? Can you please make my wife get pregnant? Right? All good things. And so she conceives. And the children struggled together within her, and she said, "If it be so, why am I thus?" And she went to inquire of the Lord. So she's having a difficult pregnancy, right? And she's like, what is going on inside of me, right? So she goes and talks to God about it. And the Lord said unto her, 2 nations are in thy womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels. And the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. And when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb. And then it goes on to talk about Esau and Isaac. Or not Isaac, Jacob and Esau. And how they were different. But so she goes to God, and God gives her what amounts to a promise, right? So it's God informing her of something that's going to happen. Now, we saw this with God informing Abraham that he was going to be the father of many nations, right? When God gives us a promise like that, and there's different kinds of promises in the Bible. If you look at the Old Testament, God will tell people things ahead of time, and then they happen, okay? That's one kind of promise, right? And then there's other ones which are like if-then statements. So God will say, if you follow my commandments and do this, this will happen. And if you don't, this will happen, right? This is one of the first kind. So this one is merely God letting her know what's going on, right? Now, when God lets us know in these promises, it's not necessarily for us to have to do anything to make it happen, right? Because God is just informing us of what is going to happen. It's not our job to make it happen, like we saw with Abraham and Sarah. Sarah got tired of waiting for the promise and started doubting the promise, right? And so she tried to make it happen, and that's where things went wrong. We're going to continue on and see what happens. Now, we also are not told here if Rebekah goes to her husband and tells him about this promise. We don't know exactly any conversations that happened with that, just so y'all know. We're going to move on to verse, 25 to 28? Yeah. So 25 says, "And the first came out red, all over like a hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. And after that came his brother out, and he took hold on Esau's heel, and his name was called Jacob. And Isaac was 80 years old when she bare them." So they got married when he was 40. She had the kids when he's 60. So it's been 20 years. Okay. "And the boys grew, and Esau was a cunning hunter, a man of the field, and Jacob was a plain man, dwelling in tents. And Isaac loved Esau because he did eat of his venison, but Rebekah loved Jacob." Here's our first little tidbit that something is amiss, okay? Because they specifically specified this, okay, that Isaac loves Esau and Rebekah loves Jacob, which means something happened along the way, right, where Rebekah is preferring her younger son to her elder son, right, and then Isaac, whether in reaction to Rebekah doing that or something else, prefers his elder son over his younger son. So obviously there's probably something going on, conversations about their sons that they are in a tiff or rifting over. Okay, that's our first clue that something's wrong. And then we move on. Genesis chapter 26. You can read the rest of 25 and stuff like that if you like. Go for it. Verse 26. No, chapter 26. Now, in verses 2 through 5, God reiterates the promise that he gave to Abraham. So he said, you're going to be a father of many nations, la-di-da-di-da. He now gives this promise to Isaac, okay? Saying that, as I was doing with your father, I'm doing it with you. Nations are going to come out of you, okay? Reiterating that promise. Then you go to verses 6 through 11. Now, this is going to remind you, if you've watched the other videos, of Abraham and Sarah. It says, well, let's go with verse 6. "And Isaac dwelt in Gerar, and the men of the place asked him of his wife. And he said, she is my sister." for he feared to say, she is my wife. Lest, said he, the men of the place should kill me for Rebekah, because she was fair to look upon. Now, if you don't know the Abraham and Sarah story, Abraham did this with Sarah not once, but twice, right? Now, here's the thing. It said specifically here that he feared, okay? Now, men, as we talked about when we talked about Adam and Eve, men are supposed to be protectors, right? Providers, right? So when he is afraid here, he is stepping back from that protector role because it's his job to protect his wife. Now, he's roundabout justifying it, saying, well, I'm protecting her by deceiving everybody and lying about it. That's not the case, right? The best way to have gone about this, as we said with Abraham and Sarah, would be to trust God, tell the truth, and then still protect your wife and trust that God will do the same, right? And that God will protect you and her. But of course, when we fear, it leads to things like deceit. It leads to things like stepping outside of our specific roles as men or women, right? And stepping out of, so for Isaac, it's stepping out of masculinity and like stepping back almost into a more feminine role of just kind of deceiving and being back and just waiting to see what happens in a weird sort of way. Not that a feminine role is to deceive, but when you have fear into the mix, deceit usually follows along, right? So he tells them she's his sister. And it came to pass when he had been there a long time that Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out at a window and saw, and behold, Isaac was sporting with Rebekah, his wife. So Isaac and Rebekah are out there getting it on. And this king sees it. And Abimelech called Isaac and said, behold, of a surety she is your wife. Obviously. And how saidst thou, she is my sister? And Isaac said unto him, because I said, lest I die for her. And Abimelech said, what is this thou hast done unto us? One of the people might lightly have lined with thy wife, and thou shouldest have brought guiltiness upon us. And Abimelech charged all his people, saying, he that toucheth this man or his wife shall surely be put to death. Okay, so the king's PO'd, as happened with the Abraham and Sarah ones too. You would think Isaac would have heard these stories from his parents and then not did the same thing. But hey, the king's like, you just deceived us and we could have ended up falling into sin and having issues because of it. Not a good idea, right? But that's the thing. When we step back from trusting God, right? So Isaac stepped back from trusting God in this situation. Instead of trusting it to God's hands in the way the servant, right, trusted finding Rebekah into God's hands. Instead of doing that, he tries to do it himself. He steps back, he steps out of the masculine role into a feminine role, fears, and could have ultimately led to his wife being raped or something else. It wasn't the best idea. God, of course, took care of everything and had the king find out. But, not the best way to handle things, of course. Now, we're going to skip down. Verses 12 to 33 is basically describing how Isaac is there, he's gaining wealth, stuff like that. He's being blessed by God. Now we're going to go to verse 34. Oops. And Esau was 40 years old, so the twins are 40 years old, when he took to wife Judith, the daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and Bashemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, which were a grief of mind unto Isaac and to Rebekah. So if you read anything in the Old Testament, the Hittites, they talk about Jebusites and a bunch of other ones, Ammonites, etc. Usually those were the pagan cultures, if you will, ones that were serving other gods. And so Esau taking these women as his wives was, of course, a grief of mind to Isaac and Rebekah, because the cultural differences, the religious differences going on there. Now, of course, it says that Isaac and to Rebekah, so they were of the same mind on this part, at least. We're going to move to chapter 27, verse 1. And it came to pass that when Isaac was old, and his eyes were dim, so that he could not see, he called Esau his eldest son, and said unto him, My son. And he said, Behold, here I am. And he said, Behold, now I am old, I know not the day of my death. Now therefore take, I pray thee, thy weapons, thy quiver and thy bow, and go out to the field, and take me some venison, and make me savory meat, such as I love, and bring it to me, that I may eat, and my soul may bless thee before I die. So Isaac, again, in this culture, everything was passed down usually to the eldest son, okay? And since Esau is technically the eldest, it's supposed to be passed down to him, and they would do that by blessing the next generation, right? Which was basically an act of more or less stating what your will is while you're still alive before you die, kind of a deal. So Isaac plans to pass down his inheritance to Esau, right? But plans to bless him. Now here's where things go awry on Rebekah's part. Verse 5, And Rebekah heard when Isaac spoke to Esau his son. And Esau went to the field to hunt for venison and to bring it. And Rebekah spake unto Jacob her son, saying, Behold, I heard thy father speak unto Esau thy brother, saying, Bring me venison, and make me savory meat, that I may eat and bless thee before the Lord before my death. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice according to that which I command thee. Go now to the flock, and fetch from thence 2 good kids of the goats, and I will make them savory meat for thy father, such as he loveth. And thou shalt bring it to thy father, that he may eat, and that he may bless thee before his death. Now, Rebekah is pulling a not trusting God moment, okay? So she had that promise from God that her younger son was going to be ruler over the elder. And she sees that Isaac is getting older, right? Isaac can't see very well, so she probably is fearing that Isaac is going to die soon. And if he's going to die soon and he blesses Esau, then what she heard from God wouldn't come to pass in her mind, okay? So instead of trusting that God would take care of the situation, she goes and starts getting deceptive herself. As we said with this one, fear on behalf of both men and women takes you and flops you into the opposite gender role, right? So her fear leads to deceit. Same thing with Isaac's from earlier. But her fear leads to her stepping up into a masculine role, shucking off her femininity, right? And stepping into a masculine role of initiating and making this happen. Sarah did the same thing. Didn't turn out well. It's never a good idea to try and make the promise happen yourself. Better to just trust God to let him do it, right? Continuing on. And Jacob said to Rebekah, his mother, Behold, Esau my brother is a hairy man, and I'm a smooth man. My father peradventure will feel me, and I shall seem to him as a deceiver, and I shall bring a curse upon me, and not a blessing. So her son's like, yeah, this doesn't seem like a good idea. Maybe I shouldn't do this. And his mother said unto him, Upon me be thy curse, my son. Only obey my voice, and go fetch me them. And he went and fetched, and brought them to his mother, and his mother made savory meat, such as his father loved. And Rebekah took goodly raiment of her eldest son, so now she's, borrowing without asking. She took Esau's clothes, which were with her in the house, and put them upon Jacob, her younger son. And she put the skins of the kids of the goats upon his hands and upon the smooth of his neck. So they're putting him in disguise, and she's taking goat skins to put on his hands and on his neck so he'll feel hairy like his brother. I mean, this is a really deep level of deception going on here. And of course, we don't know exactly what was going on with her and Isaac before this, how the boys were raised. We don't know, if this is just something that's been a bone of contention with them from the beginning. We don't know exactly everything that led her to doing this. But what we do know, obviously, is the important parts, is that she stopped trusting God. She didn't trust that God would bring the promise to pass. She thinks that she's going to do it herself. And that's what's leading to problems and sin here, right? Verse 17, and she gave the savory meat and the bread which she had prepared to the hand of her son Jacob. Now here's the thing. Jacob also has a choice in this, right? He could have said, no. He could have been like, no, I'm not going to deceive my father. But he listens to his mom. Making, us as readers almost wonder if he's very much a mama's boy, right? Because it said that she loved him and Isaac loved Isaac loved Esau, sorry. But for him to then listen to her, it's obvious, he's a man at this point, right? Like, he's at least 40 plus years old at this point. And for him to listen to her and go along with this deception himself, he, of course, was then stepping back from his own masculine role and just taking on a submissive role to his mother. And so he goes in, right? He deceives Isaac and gets all the blessings. So gets everything inherited to him. And then, Esau comes in and is like, hey, Dad, I brought the venison that you asked for. And Isaac's like, so what? Your brother came in and took your blessings, which, of course, is grieving Esau. If you go up to verse 41, now it says, and Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing wherewith his father blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, so inside he's saying, the days of mourning for my father are at hand. Then I will slay my brother Jacob. And these words of Esau, her elder son, were told to Rebekah. And she sent and called Jacob her younger son, and said unto him, behold, thy brother Esau, as touching thee, doth comfort himself, purposing to kill thee. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice, and arise, flee thou to Laban my brother to Haran, and tarry with him a few days, until thy brother's fury turn away, until thy brother's anger turn away from thee, and he forget that which thou hast done to him. I love how she shifts the blame here. Then I will send and fetch thee from thence. Why should I be deprived also of you both in one day? And Rebekah said to Isaac, I am weary of my life because of the daughters of Heth. If Jacob take a wife of the daughters of Heth, such as these which are the daughters of the land, what good shall my life do me? And that phrase right there is the last that we hear of Rebekah. So somehow we go from her trusting God, right? Her going off on this adventure to go get married to some guy she hasn't met. She's trusting that God's leading the way. He loves her. They're together. He prays on her behalf. They conceive and have twins, right? And then somehow her trust in God wanes. And his trust does a little bit from time to time too. But mostly on this one, it's on her end. Who knows if that particular him saying she's my sister made a rift between them, and that's what led it to being okay, like for her to feel like it was okay to deceive her husband and like deceive her eldest son and, help Jacob steal the blessing away. We don't know exactly what happened. But we do know that when she was trusting God, her life was good, right? And that's a lesson for us today. When we trust God, our life is good. When we trust God, we don't have to stress, we don't have to worry, we don't have to bring promises to pass ourselves, right? God will make things happen. When we don't trust him, though, that's when things start going awry, because then we put all this stress upon ourselves, right? Like that we have to get things done, that we have to make it happen. And the reality is, this is God's job. It's not our job. It's not our job to worry and stress about tomorrow and try and figure it all out ourselves and make it happen. It's our job to step back and let God do the heavy lifting for us, right? And to trust that He will provide and He will protect and do all the things that He has promised that He will do. Now, of course, Jacob flees. He goes and he ends up with wives and stuff like that. Later on, he does come back. Him and his brother do reconcile. And it says that, Isaac got to see him again, before he passed away. So things did end up going well towards the end. We don't hear anything else about Rebekah, though, except later on we find out that she was buried with Isaac. They were both buried in the same place. But we don't hear anything else about her. We don't know if he comes back and reconciles with his mom. We don't know if she reconciles with Isaac. We don't know how this played out further on down the line between the two of them. But there are some good lessons to take away from this. And I hope so, that this has blessed whoever it's meant to get to. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye, guys.